Stop
making a movie of us.
Okay, we're rolling.
Okay, let's do it. The spine of the story pretty much stayed the same from how we had conceived it when we were working on season 1, which is that we knew that we wanted to get Gemma out by the end of it. We wanted sort of this mystery of why she was there to be at least somewhat not solved, but sort of brought to this next phase. I always knew that it was going to end in that moment with Mark getting her to the door. And but it was while we were writing it that we sort of came up with this arc for Mark, that for any Mark, that by that point, you know, he would have sort of learned to prioritize his own existence on the same level as the Audis. And so, you know, while the series starts with him running to find Gemma, we realized that it was going to end with him sort of heartbreakingly turning his back on her.
No, Mark!
There's a little bit of discussion along the way about where we would end that scene and whether or not we would, or we talked about like possibly, you know, sort of ending the scene before he made the choice between the two of them. And the more we thought about it, it's what Dan was saying. It's just, we thought it was a really interesting trajectory that he would start this season, you know, so on the search for her and then turn away at the end. And also that any Mark would hopefully have earned in terms of the audience's point of view and why he would do that, you know, earn that choice, but also hopefully the audience would also feel that Audi Mark's point of view would, you know, be something they'd empathize with too. We really wanted the season 2 finale to be different, and we thought it kind of set up a lot of intriguing possibilities for the audience to see Mark and Helly run down that hallway sort of into this, you know, kind of very uncertain future. I think Mike Nichols is like one of the most influential directors from before, I guess, like my generation. And what he created in that last moment was this idea of like the, you know, protagonist who finally gets what he wants and then he doesn't know then what, you know, then what happens for the rest of your life. And I think there's a similar sort of idea behind that. But then there's also, you know, for me, this sort of like kind of weird sort of dichotomy of them running off into the sunset together, but then it's also into the bowels of Lumen and scary idea of what lies in front of them. So there were elements of that. And then, yeah, the freeze frame was just something I've enjoyed in movies growing up, you know, 60s and 70s, French New Wave, early 70s movies. You know, let's freeze this moment in time.
Yeah, we ended season 1 with everybody angry at us. And so we thought, let's end this one with only half of the people angry at us.
We thought if half of the audience was mad at us, we'd be doing our job.
Yeah.
My husband has had trouble keeping other jobs.
He dumb?
No.
He a dick?
No.
What is wrong with him?
Oh, nothing's wrong with him. He never quite found his thing.
Dylan's relationship with himself and his wife, how in a weird way these men, like, grappling with aspects of themselves and their love are really mirroring each other in such a beautiful, interesting way. And
everybody's sort of on the same page in terms of that kind of thing. And if the idea is really strong, it's been interesting over the course of the 2 seasons to see these different things that some of the fans have found too, you know, corollaries that sometimes we were thinking of consciously and sometimes not, but actually work because it's kind of where everybody's been sort of like headed anyway. So you find this sort of synchronicity.
Milchek and I are weirdly mirroring each other in our loneliness, in our own self-discovery of our different aspects of our shadow side that we've hidden. Like the first season, he's like, oh yes, I'm this nice, helpful guy. Yes, maybe I'm telling Natalie stuff on the side, but yes, I'm like this. And now this season, like, I'm empowered, but I'm going to do it different. And here's how I'm going to do power. But I'm trying to earn love too in this kind of way. And then Cobell is alone and like, what's the truth? And what is my past? And why am I not being seen in this way? In a weird way, it's all these different kind of fractals of human beings. Yes, we have goats. Yes, we have a whole scientific procedure. But it's also weirdly these human aspects that I think do resonate with people that we are all kind of struggling with in this weird time.
Hey, well, I guess you know who I am. I think you've spoken with Devin and Miss Cobell. So you know what it is that we're asking. But the first thing I need to say to you is that I am so sorry. You know, I created you as a prisoner and as an escape.
You know, it was something that had been talked about all season, and that I was honestly dreading because it sounded hard and it sounded like something that I could screw up any number of ways, you know? And so shooting it was something I was freaked out about. And we started really kind of workshopping and going through it pretty early on and massaging it. And Dan and the writers were really kind of changing it as we went. And then when we got on the set, we started really going through it with a fine-tooth comb and trying to figure out exactly what the conversation should be. And we were changing it right up until, like, we had to start shooting it Monday morning. We were changing it right up until, Friday night, and then we had to stop because I had to memorize it at some point.
Yeah. It felt like every time we rehearsed it, we would find something else or a different question would come up.
Yeah, in some of the shots, you can actually hear me typing rewrites.
That's right. The conversation needed to, we knew where it needed to end up, but also these guys needed to talk to each other. I mean, they were on this collision course all season, so it had to happen. And their interests at the beginning of the season were aligned. At a certain point, they start to diverge, and then they get on this collision course, so they have to communicate. But there's also there's sort of a novelty to it for both of them. And we had to kind of find that, but without sort of going to a place of, what kind of shampoo do we use? You know, like we needed to avoid silliness, but we also needed to get that feeling of this is crazy and weird, but also needed to get to the heart of the matter and get to the kind of marrow of what the scene needed to be. So it was a really tricky thing for these guys to write and to figure out, and they did an incredible job.
And filming it was challenging for Adam because, you know, he had to just do a whole scene with himself and he had the videos that he had recorded for either character to respond to.
Yeah.
But there was so much coverage and just keeping it all straight.
Yeah.
I'm just amazed how he did it because I was having trouble keeping it straight in my head just, you know, as we were trying to figure out how to film it. And just thinking about Adam having to do that on an acting level was pretty weird.
I have to say, by far the most difficult scene partner I've ever worked with.
Yeah.
Hey, do you want me to, describe what happened? I feel like you have every right.
No, I don't want her memory.
Okay.
I want my own.
Obviously, when I'm Helena posing as Helly, Helena had a similar job to myself as an actor, which was her job was to blend in to this family that she is just kind of encountering for the first time, and she's having to do the same kind of role as we do as actors, which is to assume an identity and to move around like that person. They sound like different music in my head. So I use music a lot when I'm getting ready in the morning. There's a lot of inspiration once you get to set by the elements around you that are shifted slightly based on where you're at. And I think it was something we worked really closely with with Ben. We were trying to figure out, well, what things slip through, when is her acting not so good, and when is she able to tap into that part of her, that inner rebel that she's maybe abandoned from childhood, or has maybe never had full access to, but kind of, especially in 204, she gets a kick out of playing against Milchick and getting to be the one in the classroom who's disrupting, well, not the classroom, but the campfire.
Yeah. So disruptive.
You know, what you were saying about it kind of mirroring your role as an actor, I think is true for me in terms of thinking about the distinctions between the innie and the outie, because anytime you're playing a character, there's like pieces of you that are in there, but there are pieces of the character that aren't necessarily in you. And so I think that is a little bit how I thought about the distinction between the two, of they are very much the same guy, but there are pieces that don't cross over. And for me, I think especially the innie is a version of the guy who doesn't have any of the external baggage that the outie is carrying around. So that was like kind of my initial way into it. And then also I just did all the same stuff Britt did.
I have followed protocol, Mr. Drummond. But I thank you for your remonstration.
A needlessly complex word for a simple idea. Apologize for the word.
I'm sorry.
Again.
Mr. Drummond.
Again.
Devour feculence.
Milchick, you know, he's had his back up against the wall from day one, you know, and now in this new leadership position and what he had to do to get to that leadership position, he doesn't have a whole lot of space to exercise that energy out. And, you know, being face to face to an employer who is policing your speech on top of all the other things that you have done, it just got to be too much. And I think it was a wonderful moment where Milchick finally stood up for himself and told them men to back off.
There's drill sergeants, you know, there's a certain corporate way that they're talking, or this structure that's power, and it's allowed and it's permissible. And there's certain organizations, I'm not going to say which one, where they have this kind of built-in thing with superiors where they're allowed to admonish you in a certain kind of a way. So I definitely thought that was a part of the Lumen earlier guard. Maybe it's phasing out now, but you and I, you saw the tail end of that thing too. So we have a little bit of a shared language.
Milchick started out as, you know, this sort of like sometimes scary figure. I think this season, you know, you really start to see, you know, other aspects of him and what he wrestles with in terms of being a boss to them, and does he see them as people, or, you know, because I think Cobell maybe looks at innies in a different way, but then also Cobell has, they both, even though they're the sort of the management and sometimes the antagonists, they really both have a sensitivity too, because you see it with you and how you feel about Mark, and almost a sort of maternal feeling towards him. And I think Milchick also has, you know, wrestles with his feelings of what he's doing to these people.
Milchick is now bridging the gap to this new corporate idea, like, oh, we want our employees to be happy. We want you to express yourself. We want these little, you know, breaks in your tension, but also for you to like yourself as a boss and to reflect yourself back in that way, where I don't think that's so much the case with Cobell, but it's more like Cobell is working out some interior thing through them.
Yeah, I don't think Cobell would have handled the rebellion in the same way.
No, she would not. And she should have been in charge.
I got to that.
Here we go.
You child.
I was a little nervous about doing the choreography of Merriment scene because, you know, we had a dancing scene in season 1 that was so iconic. And, you know, it was very clear that we didn't want to repeat MDE. And so when they said, you know, hey, we might have a marching band going in, and I'm like, ooh, a marching band? This is kind of fun.
Let's go.
I remember having the conversation with Ben and Dan about, how Milchick would fall into place with this, whether he would be the band director or the drum major. And knowing that there were two different songs that were being played, I thought it was really brilliant that we had decided that the hymn would be more traditional in presentation. And then the ballad of Ambrose and Gunnell, that's what Milchick said. Let that flag fly. Have fun with it. So.
I got to feel a lot of empathy for the Lumen world this season, because season 1 I was wandering around as Helar being like, what the hell are you guys talking about? Why do you talk like that? This is so weird. And then I got to, through that process, and learn how they operate. And then in season 2, I'm stepping into a Lumen role and getting to see how isolated and trapped you are within the company on the outside world as well. And everyone has a check and a balance. There's kind of no one who isn't being watched at any given time, even if you are someone's boss.
And also Helena's home life.
Yeah.
There's like the shadow of Lumen weighs very heavily, even there. It's like you're always doing something wrong.
I think given the circumstances with that dad, Helena's doing great.
My designs! Circuit blueprint, base code, overtime contingency, Glasgow block, all of it!
The now infamous story is that I had the idea while working at a door factory, but I was in the office of the door factory. So I was doing office work in this weird little basement place. But over the course of writing the pilot, I actually got through, I went through like 4 or 5 different office jobs, none of which I could ultimately hold on to. And I, at one point, was working at a place that had there were these sort of it was a global company with these unseen sort of overlords. We didn't even know what country they were in. We would just hear it's like there's some decree that's come down from the from corporate, and now this is what you have to do.
Hello, is anyone there? Is the board on? It's Marquez from Macro.
I would do that, and then I would go on my breaks to go write scenes for the show before they left my head, because it was so direct at times.
Wow. I mean, it's just been fun to the second season to see how many more people discovered it, because the first season I felt like we had a loyal audience that really got the show, but this season it just felt like so many more people were watching it, and the level of engagement that you're talking about, the fan art, and how they create videos and actual paintings and pictures, and the interaction is like something that's really exciting.
And it really is flattering to be a part of something that's inspiring people to make stuff. It's really fun.
We're not in trouble?
I don't think so. Milchick said we're famous.
All of us equally, or one of us is like the star?
Because you always put a lot of your own self into something, but then to feel that the response to it has an equal commitment from the audience is something that's, I think, I haven't experienced before, and that feels great.
And last night we watched the finale with a huge audience of like 3,000 people.
Yeah.
And to watch it with this crowd, and when Tramell first comes on screen and the place goes nuts, and then the elevator opens on Dylan and the place goes nuts. It was like, holy shit, this is like Star Wars. What is going on?
Season 1 we had COVID. Season 2 was the strikes. I was worried about this asteroid that they were talking about for a while, but apparently that's not going to hit us, they're saying.
It was at a cool 2%.
It was like 2%. I think that's down to 1 or something now.
The inner Cobell in me now, when people are like, how long is it going to be? It's going to be as long as it needs to.
That's right.
If you're going to wait.